SwiftUI is a different beast. Now, this, I will say, why is this important? It's not part of our competencies, but I wanted to show this to you because this is the future. This is where Apple's taking things. And I think eventually we might see storyboards go away. And I think there's a good reason for that. I have found, now again, I'm more of a programmer than the I forget which side of the brain it is, right or left side, but I'm not so much of the graphic person, although I've taught animation, I've taught graphics, I've taught Photoshop. I had to work at those things. Programming to me comes much easier. I'm more of an analytical person than I'm a design person. All right, so let's take a look at SwiftUI. So the difference when you create a SwiftUI project, so let's just come here and go new project. Again, I'll create a single view project, click next, but the difference here is the user interface. Rather than storyboard, you would choose SwiftUI. Cancel that. Let's bring up our SwiftUI project. Here's our SwiftUI project. Looks similar to a storyboard project, but you'll notice a few things different. There's no view controller. In fact, the circle image view and the map view Swift files were not there to begin with. I added those in. So what you get is you get a scene delegate, you get a content view, and then you have your assets. So the content view is where we create our interface. Now, I will say I'm at a disadvantage here because I'm not running Catalina. If you were running Catalina, this little button up here on the editor allows you to come in and select canvas. And you'll get a real-time mock-up of your screen as you design it. What I had to do is just simply design and then run it in the simulator to check it. But that canvas is really cool. I'm going to try to get my machine upgraded to Catalina as quickly as possible because I really want to play with this more. Okay, so in fact, I'm going to, just to demonstrate that, how this works, it'll be easier if I create another new project real quickly here. So I'm going to go to new project. Next, I'm just going to call this SwiftUI 2. Give me a SwiftUI file. Let's go next. Create. Okay, so in the content view, this is what we have. We have the hello world. No storyboard. If I run it, we get hello world. Okay, it took a while to first load in. It shouldn't be that slow. Now, I can add more things here. But let's watch what happens if I add another text box. Text. Let's just say, and by the way, the controls are different. Those, we're not using UIKit here, although I'm going to show you how you can use UIKit. So we have text controls, we have buttons. So I'm going to say, welcome to SMCC. And notice, so I wanted to have happen is two different text boxes. One says hello world, one says welcome to SMCC. And I'm getting an error. And the reason for that is the view that's being created here can only have one item. Well, that's not quite true. It can have one parent item. So what I have to do is create, in this case, I'm going to create a vertical stack. So we had our vertical stack layout. So here's just V stack. And then I can put these items inside the V stack. And now I'm going to run. Okay, so now I get both. Now it's always going to put the stack in the center. But what if I wanted it at the top? Well, I can add a spacer. Now, spacers are going to take as much room as it can. So it's going to force these to the very top. Okay, down at the very top. If I put the spacer up here at the top rather than the bottom. They would have been at the very bottom. But I can do this. Let's add a spacer in between them. One at the top, one at the bottom, one in between. And now this is going to basically come in at the, this is going to be equidistant from each other in the upper half and the lower half. And there we go. Everything's evenly spaced. Let's add one more. I can put stacks inside of stacks. And there's also a horizontal stack. So let's add an H stack. And in the H stack, I'll add a text. I didn't add any images in here, so let's just do text. We'll do an A text B, and a text C. Okay, now I can also change attributes on these things. These are called modifiers. So I can say dot, let's say font weight. I'm going to set this to just a dot heavy. Okay, and let's change the color. So I can do a dot foreground color, foreground color, and I specify a color. So we're going to say, let's just say dot red. Let's make this one a foreground color. Dot make it a dot green. All right, and I want another spacer at the bottom here. So we'll have these three items spaced evenly apart.
Spacer needs to be capital on the very last one you put in.
Oh, thank you. And there we go. Here's my horizontal stack, the letters going across. Now, if I want to space these out, I can use spacers for that as well. Now, I've used spacers before as a trick in things like Xamarin, where I create a little blank, clear alpha 0 PNG file, has nothing in it, just to put space. I think it's kind of cool they added a spacer object for this purpose. Unfortunately, I don't think you can change, oops, capitalize S. I don't think you can change the amount of space. It just does it equally, or takes up as much space as it can. So when there's multiples, it will divide the space between them. So now, they're evenly spaced apart. Okay, so that's how we work with developing the interface through the coding aspect. By the way, all of these different modifiers and the whole thing, here's the cool thing about Canvas. This is why I want to have Catalina. You don't have to code it here. In Canvas, you can select the object, and then basically it will drop downs where you can change the attributes visually, and it changes your code for you. So you're going to see that when you watch Chris Ching's videos, or other videos on SwiftUI. It's pretty slick. It's like working in Visual Studio for those who came from the C# background. We can do it through code, we can do it visually. The two are tied together. There's also a listing of all the different attributes, and it's like 100 different attributes for some of these things. You can change all kinds of stuff. All right, so let's go back to the project I'm going to have you build. Let me just run it. So we're going to use MapKit to locate South Mountain Community College and display it in the top half here using map. Then we're going to create an image, and the cool thing, you can easily mask the image to a circle or other shapes. And then we're gonna add a little outline around the circle. Here's the text, basically no different than what I just showed you. These are just text properties. And then we're gonna create some buttons. And the buttons here are in a horizontal stack. So I have a vertical stack of the map, the image, the text, and then a horizontal stack of the buttons. So let's look at how that was done. Now, in the tutorial that Apple puts together, they have you create the image in a separate view. And that works really well. But then I thought, do we need to do that? So I did it two different ways. I wanted to see if it would work if I could create just an image. So you're going to see here, here's my stack view. So I have a map view. So I added a map view Swift file that I created the map view in. And all I'm doing is I'm calling that view here, and I'm adjusting the height to the top, and then edges ignore safe area. Remember in the more recent phones, there's a kind of a white area up here at the top where they show you some status information. If you don't do that, you're gonna get the white bar up here. So the edges ignore safe area allows it to take up the full screen. Okay, we'll come back and look at the map view in a minute. Then they have you create, in the tutorial, a circle image view, and I added that in. And then you bring that in, and they have you offset it. And by setting the offset, you can have that circle overlap the object above it in the stack. So the offset here puts the circle, the top half of the circle, on top of our map. The images I brought in were a little small, so I scaled the effect to double the image size. And then you can add padding as well. So the padding here allows this information to come up a little bit higher, actually with the spacer, to have a little bit less space. Now I replaced that with the image. So let me go to assets here real quick. So in the image, in the file that I had you download, there's 3 images there, each of 3 different sizes. So we have the library, we have students, and we have grads. I simply set the image to SMCC images image index. Now I created up here a list like we did for our goose, an array named SMCC images, and it links to those 3 images in my assets folder, SMCC _ library _ students _ grads. You'll also see something here, and again, Chris Ching has a really good video on this of using state properties. If I want to change values inside here, like I want to be able to change my image, I need to work with state properties. So I simply set up an image index. Which one of these 3 files do I want to see? So it comes up initially as 0. It's going to show the library. So I'm going to run this again. There's the library. If I change that to a 1, run it again, we're going to get the student view. And of course, if I change it to a 2, we'll get the grads view. Okay. So the image that's being displayed here is based on my array and the index numbers. That will allow us to change this as we interact with the buttons. Dot clip shape, that puts it into the circle, trims off the corners, gives us a nice circle effect. I did an overlay of adding a black stroke that's 3 pixels wide. Little drop shadow effect. Now think about doing this stuff in Storyboard. A little bit harder. We've all experienced the pain of working with the constraints. No constraints here. Do it all in code. Setting the offsets again is going to put that circle up high, doubling it, padding the bottom, -40, so it brings everything up a little bit underneath it. I'll show you what the circle image view did here in a minute. So then I have a spacer. Here's my vertical stack of the 3 text labels. And setting the different weights here, heavy, medium, medium. Now I had another one here because I wanted a little more space. So this again is just a little trick I thought about. What I used to do with blank images, why not just add another blank text field? So I just text field to space and made that weight heavy just to have a little bit more space till it hits the horizontal stack, the H stack. Here's the H stack, spacer, button. And the action for this button is a closure. I'm simply going to set self.imageIndex. We have to use self for anything inside the closure. So I'm referring to image index. That's up here. I'm going to set it to 0. As soon as I do that, when I click that button and that image index gets set to 0, my image will change because this is just going to be, you can sort of think there's almost a timer on this thing that it's going to direct the image that's being displayed and apply all of the same attributes or modifiers. Here's how I create my button. Give it the text. I gave that text some font weight, made it white. I added some padding of 3 pixels all the way around. I want the button to look like a graphical button, but I want a little more padding on the left and right. So I did .leading.trailing and give it more padding. I think, I'm just going to try this, that in this case, we could do horizontal. Let's see. Yeah, if we do horizontal, that should be both the leading and the trailing. If you wanted leading, trailing, and bottom, you could have an array here of all 3 of those. So .leading, .trailing, .bottom, comma separated. Setting the color. And the color I used here is the South Mountain color. That's CF7F00. Well, CF, if I did the math right in my head, is 207. Those of you who are mathematicians can maybe do the equation from hex to decimal in your head. So CF, I think, was 207. And then the green, which was 7F, 127. And of course, the blue is 0. So that gives me that orange background for South Mountain. And then I can attach a corner radius. Now, one thing I learned watching through Chris's videos, the order of these can be important. If you set the corner radius up above the padding doesn't work for the corner radius. I think the padding doesn't work because it's actually taking the padding with the corner radius in effect. To the spacer, same, basically I just duplicated the button code, and changed it to students, changed the index to 1, spacer, another button, change the index to 2, change the text to grads. Everything else stays the same. That's my interface. And that's my button actions built in essence, to the interface. I think that's pretty slick. Now let's look at the MapView kit. So the MapView kit, I simply came over and added a new file. And here I added I guess it was just it was a SwiftUI view. That's what it is, SwiftUI view, not a Swift file. So SwiftUI view gives me another view, and then this was my code. So here I added in or imported the MapKit. We haven't looked at MapKit. It's something you can explore on your own. You know enough now to go in and play with it. But if you wanted to have an app where, maybe people click on buttons to look at different locations of a store, let's say Home Depot, and you want to map where those locations are of Home Depot, all you need to know is the latitude and longitude. Now, how do you find that? You can get that through Google Maps. So I look for South Mountain Community Library. There is the latitude and longitude in the links up here at the top. I copy that in. Now, sometimes these are a little bit off from what I've discovered. I had to change it a little bit to get it to reflect well. So basically just the latitude. And part of that was I wanted to center in the map, but I wanted to center on South Mountain. And the elements that I put in there, they show, didn't center it. So I just brought it up a little bit. I just played with those numbers till I got to where I wanted it. So I'm creating, yes.
Not this one, but the other Swift file that you created, did you do Swift or did you do Cocoa?
The other Swift file, which one?
The first one you said you created.
So the map view was the first one here I'm demonstrating. So the content view comes in. So
Right.
so on the project, I created gain.
Well, what about map view? Was that a Swift or did you use Cocoa?
This is a framework built into Swift, and all you do is import it.
Okay.
It's like import UIKit. Now, I will say MapKit does not work with SwiftUI as it is. Notice I also imported UIKit here. And so what I had to do, and again, this is all explained in the tutorial that Apple puts out, is you set the structure here of a UI view representable. That allows you to use MapKit.
Okay.
So, but you have to import UIKit along with that. So, because MapKit uses UIKit. Then, function, make UI view. And I'm making a MapKit map view. MK map view, frame 0. I'm not sure what the frame 0 is. I guess it'd be if you animated a map, maybe. I'm not quite sure about that. That just came out of the tutorial. And then updating the view. So here, I created a variable called SMCC coordinates equals CL location coordinate 2D, and then specified the latitude and longitude. Again, I just played with that number a little bit. I reduced it down to bring the center up a little bit. Span, had to play with these numbers as well. This is the zoom in, zoom out. To get the map where I wanted it, I started at 2 or 3, I think, and I kept going down to 0.06 is where I finally landed on that I thought looked good. You can play with those numbers. Might vary a little bit depending on the device you're designing for. Region. So the region here is going to specify what I want in the center. I want the center I want to be the SMCC coordinates. And then the span is going to take my span here. That's the zoom in view. Now, this was not in the tutorial. I added this in. I did a little research. I wanted to do a pin where South Mountain Community College was, and especially if the views, if the map is viewed out or zoomed out, you don't see it say South Mountain Community College. So I created an annotation of MapKit point animation. Set the coordinates to the SMC coordinates, and then a title of South Mountain Community College. It's going to put that text on the map with the pin. I set up my UI view, set the region up here, set animated to true, and then I added the annotation that I just created on these 3 lines on top of that map. There's also a map view preview. I don't think this really comes into play. This is going to be, again, for the canvas aspect. I didn't make any changes there. All I did was just set this up. So you see it's pretty straightforward. So that creates the map. And then again, in the content view, all I'm doing is calling the map view. And then moving it up and basically setting the edges to go all the way to a bleed to the top edge, top and left, right edges. Now, here is the circle view. So the circle view, basically, they have you create an image, get your file that you want to display, set up the clip-shaped circle, set up the overlay, and do the shadow. That's all they did. So it got me thinking, well, if you can create an image in the content view, couldn't you do the same thing with the image and not have to use this separate circle image view? And that's what I did. That worked fine. You don't really need the circle image view. In fact, as you're creating this for the assignment, you don't need to bother to create that if you don't want to. If you want to play around with it, you can. But you can do the same thing here. Just those same modifiers affect the image that also affect the image in the image view. That is basically it. I haven't played around to figure out, could I create the map view itself here without the map view.swift? That gets a little more complicated, I think, because of having to, I guess you can import the map view, the MapKit and the UI kit here. And if you could create, for some reason you couldn't create a structure, I guess, inside and then just call map view. So this structure, I'm going to guess, somebody wants to play around with this, although I probably will, is you can create that structure separate inside the class and then call it here, because it's got a name. It's got the name of map view. Some worth trying. But adding these different views in as separate images might allow more flexibility. It basically allows you to kind of truncate things out and have people design. So you're working in an environment. So I could say, hey, Tony, I want you to do the map view kit, and Marianne, I'm going to have you do the circle image view, and then we'll just assemble them all in the content view. It's a great way of doing some team stuff. So like I said, this is where it's going. It definitely is better in Catalina because of the canvas. And if you have Catalina and you can play with that, I think you'd be really intrigued by playing with the canvas aspect and seeing things change as you change items here. The one thing I did see in Chris's video is sometimes with the canvas, you got to remember to occasionally click resume because it'll stop at some points as you're making changes. Just to update it. But it's pretty slick.
If you just jumped into this video, you can see all the videos from the iOS app development cohort playlist by clicking on the image in the lower right. And if you'd like to be alerted to future videos that I create, you can click my picture up in the top right and subscribe to the channel.